Hello guys on YouTube, it is I, Ben again. Today we have yet another operating system's birthday, one that support will be ending soon for, actually within matter of a few years, a little under 2 years. But today marks the 9th birthday of one of the second worst operating systems or Microsoft failures in Windows history, and that would be Windows Vista. As you saw back in September, I did a video on Windows Millennium, and I recorded the video on actual Windows Millennium hardware, which is why the audio went out of sync and whatnot, but I had to use a really crappy recording program. But at least on Vista, I can use an older version of Camtasia that supports, that still supports it. So since today is Windows Vista's birthday, I decided we'd go ahead and talk a little bit about Windows Vista. And of course, knowing me, I am actually running Vista Home Premium Service Pack 2 on actual Windows Vista hardware. A computer, I'm running this on a compact Presario V6000 from November of 2006 when Vista was a brand new thing. This was actually one of the first Vista laptops ever built, believe it or not. And it's solely designed for Vista, because if you go on the Compaq website, it'll say it's only for Vista. And as you can see, there's some crapware coming up, some of the Compaq bloatware, and yeah, it's just telling me, hey, you need to sign up for the internet. I don't ever want to be reminded of this again, so you know what? You can go die in a hole. Compaq bloatware. Anyways, so I thought today we'd go ahead and talk about what was new in Vista from XP and give a little brief history lesson. So before I start, I'd like to start on the history of Windows Vista. Windows Vista was originally known as Windows codename Blackcomb, which was released around 01 when Windows XP was a brand new thing. And then there was another project, Longhorn, which is what Vista eventually became known as in beta stages. Blackcomb was Vista originally, and then there was Longhorn, which they were adding features such as a new file, I think like a WinFS file system, Windows file system, which was some sort of a variant of the NTFS file system, and it had all sorts of cool features like fast transfer speeds and copy speeds. It had all these features. I don't remember. I could drone on for hours about it, but I'll just keep it short. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out because with Longhorn they kept adding all sorts of features, and if you look at betas on YouTube, you'll see there are a lot of like the sidebar. You'll start seeing they started just taking Windows XP and making it look more like Windows XP Media Center Edition, which eventually became Windows Vista. And but Longhorn, unfortunately, they started adding so much crap that the builds became unstable and would often crash, and programs would not run. So they reset the development in 2004. So then development was reset. 04 was when the next operating system was supposed to come out, because in pre-Windows 10 times, Microsoft usually released a new version of Windows and a new version of Office every 3 to 4 years. Whereas with XP, it was kind of different because 2K and Millennium came out the previous year in the year 2000, and then XP came out in 01 because of Millennium's ultimate suckage, and of course Windows 2000 was really meant for business computers, and home users still had to suffer with the Windows 9X kernel and DOS. So that's why XP came out, and of course Millennium's failure. But Vista brought us a whole new look, because when Longhorn was in development, we saw several builds of Vista, and it looked nice. It looked very aesthetically pleasing, and you can tell for an operating system from 06, it looks pretty aesthetically pleasing. The problem with Vista was it had very high system requirements, which was one of its main downfalls. There were a lot of features in Vista, especially graphical features, that most computers of the time were unable to handle. And due to that, many computers were unable to run Windows Vista, and we'll talk a little bit about those as we progress through the operating system's lifetime. When Windows Vista was released on November 8th of 2006, though only 9 years old, I can still recall its release to OEMs. original equipment manufacturers. I can still remember going on Dell's website and seeing the banner that said Windows Vista is here and stuff like that. And I was all excited because I thought this was going to be a great new operating system. And To be honest, I agree. I kind of agree with myself now that Service Pack 2 has been out since 2009. But when Windows Vista first came out, there were a lot of bugs, and it was considered one of the worst Microsoft products ever made. Some even considered it worse than Windows Millennium. So today we're just going to take a look at, as I said, we're going to take a look at Windows Vista. This is with Service Pack 2, bearing that in mind. And we're just going to go ahead and go through some of the new features, or some of the features that were new at the time. So the first new feature you'll notice is called Windows Aero. This was actually a computer that was designed to run Windows Aero, this compact Aero V6000 with a NVIDIA GeForce Go 6150 GPU and the AMD Turion 64X2 mobile technology. Yeah, not a great combination because this thing gets pretty hot, so hot you could fry an egg on it. But you'll notice that in premium editions of Windows Vista, this is the Home Premium Edition, you'll notice that if I open up Windows like this, you can see I start seeing animations. You can see how that window kind of came in from the foreground, and you can see it's sort of translucent. You can see I can if I hover over the Compact logo, I can see the Compact logo background through there. It had a whole new line of sample pictures and a whole ton of sample music that came with this that comes with it. A lot more than Windows XP came with. You can see when you minimize a window and you hover over it in the taskbar, you can see you have a thumbnail preview, which was not present in Windows XP. When you close a window, it kind of sinks into the background. And Windows Aero was basically an aesthetic change. If I press Windows Tab, I get this option called Windows Flip 3D, which was removed in Windows 8 when Aero was finally dumped. But that was a new thing in Windows Vista where you could scroll through all sorts of different screens. It was more convenient than using Alt Tab, there was also another feature similar to Aero, but it was called the Sidebar. If you look in Longhorn builds, you'll have the Sidebar here, which is on the right side of the screen. And it contains what they call gadgets, where you could have something like this analog clock here. My favorite was the CPU meter, and my favorite analog clock was this neon clock. And then you could have a photo gallery, which shows your sample pictures, and of course the news ticker, which amazingly still works. It still fetches RSS feeds. You can see I'm getting certain ads, though they're quite dated by now. If we click on the gadgets icon and we click the plus icon, you can see there are some other gadgets such as contacts, sticky notes, stocks, weather, currency. And these gadgets were actually kind of useful. In fact, I kind of miss the gadgets. I really do, because it was removed in Windows 8, but I kind of miss the gadgets, and the gadget website is down because apparently I think someone said it contained malware or something, or for security reasons Microsoft took it down, or maybe they were just tired of the gadgets. But they were trying to be more like Mac OS X Tiger, which featured Dashboard, where you could have widgets. Now, of course, Dashboard is a thing of the past because nowadays you have in OS X El Capitan, Apple removed Dashboard from the operating system. So it's kind of like what Microsoft did with Windows 8. But yes, gadgets in Windows Vista only appear on the sidebar, and in Windows 7 they can be dragged all over the desktop, though in Vista you are limited to the sidebar only. So that was a new thing in Windows Vista. Other new things, as you can see, the taskbar, instead of having a button marked Start, it actually is just a Windows orb. You can see the aqueduct with the Windows flag in it, Windows logo flag. The Start menu looks pretty similar to Windows XP, with the addition of Aero, of course. However, a few things are different. If you click on all programs, in XP you had this entire program list that would expand out here, and often and on older machines it would cause system instability. On Vista, your all programs list appears as a menu within the Start menu, so there's no more having to go out and there's no more having to hog up system resources to create an entire menu that takes up the screen and stress out the GPU. Not that it really did, but on older GPUs it kind of did stress the GPU out. Another thing you might notice is Start Search. Now this is a feature that has continued and stuck with us into Windows 10. However, in Windows 10 it's on the taskbar again rather than on the Start menu. In Windows XP they had a search bar kind of like this Yahoo search from this HP bloatware app here. This is what it looked like in XP. It was available as an update called Windows Search 4.0. In Windows Vista, the search is called Start Search, and you could search for any file. So let's say I wanted to search for, let's say, WordPad. I can type the word Word, and you can see anything that has the word Word, like Word Symphony, which is bloatware, Word Processor, Word 07, and FlipWords, and of course WordPad. I can just do a search. I can search everywhere. I can search the internet. all from the start menu. It was that was one of my favorite features of Windows Vista, because in XP you had to actually go into a separate application to perform searches, and it was a pain in the ass because it took forever. Because that's another thing I'm going to get into. Windows Vista, instead of searching the entire hard drive and going through all the system files, it took what was called an index of the hard drive, where instead of having to do an entire search through the hard drive, it would index the hard drive and it would take shadow copies and figure out what was on your hard drive at a specific date and time, and it would search based on that index, which made searches a lot quicker rather than having to search the entire hard drive. And it was really convenient. Instead of having to wait hours and hours on an XP machine for it to search. And that was one of the features I really adored about Windows Vista. Another thing that Windows Vista changed was the way you shut down your computer. Instead of having the turn off computer or shutdown button if you were joined to an XP domain, or server 2003 or 2K domain, you actually shut your computer down by clicking this little arrow and clicking shut down, and this is where all your shutdown options are. By default, this button, unless there's as you can see, I have updates available, so this turns to a shutdown button, update and shutdown button. But if no updates were available, that would be a standby button, where many users would mistake it for a shutdown button, click it, and instead it would put the computer to sleep, which is one thing I wasn't too fond of in Vista, which they changed in Windows 7, which I'm glad. But yes, that's just one of those things that Windows Vista introduced. There were also other things in Windows Vista, such as applications that came bundled with the OS. For instance, and these were not available with all editions. For example, instead of having Outlook Express, its functions were divided up into separate programs, such as Windows Calendar, Windows Contacts, and Windows Mail is what replaced Windows or Outlook Express. Windows Movie Maker got an update for Windows, specially designed for Windows Vista. But if your graphics card was deemed incompatible, you could download XP's version 2.6, which shipped with XP Service Pack 2 and later. Windows Photo Gallery, which is what replaced Photo Viewer in Windows XP, but then it was called Photo Viewer again in Windows 7. It was renamed back to that. Had Windows Media Player 11 bundled in by default. Windows Live Messenger had to be downloaded. It was no longer bundled with the OS. Windows DVD Maker, where you could make your own, burn your own DVDs. This was only available in the Home Premium and Ultimate editions of Windows Vista. The Starter, Home Basic, and Business editions did not have this function, did not have this feature. And you had Windows Media Center. Now, Windows XP had a Media Center edition, but Windows Media Center got a complete facelift. In fact, I don't think this computer would be able to record Media Center and open it at the same time. I need more powerful hardware to do that. But Media Center in Vista got a complete facelift, and it was designed to. It had more of that Aero interface, and later features such as Netflix, which unfortunately was discontinued for Media Center back in September. Now that Microsoft has abandoned Media Center. But Vista's Media Center remains one of my all-time favorites. You could also watch TV, play music, movies, and make a home theater PC out of a Windows Vista machine with Media Center. Again, Media Center was only available in the Home Premium and Ultimate editions of Vista. And then, of course, you had other stuff like tools and other stuff that came with Vista. Just other accessories. Disk Defragmenter got a facelift. It can now run on a schedule, so you don't have to do it yourself like you did in XP. You could actually do automatic defragging in Vista, which was carried over into Windows 7. And as you can see, the user interface got a completely new look. The category view was expanded, and you can see that Windows Vista has an entirely new aesthetic GUI. As you can see, this is my edition, Vista Home Premium with Service Pack 2. Another thing that was introduced, which is no longer available as of Windows 8.1, is the Windows Experience Index. Now, this was a rating that basically rated your computer based on your hardware and performance. This computer got a 2.4 because the graphics card is horrible, but your computer would be scored based on these numbers, and usually the lowest subscore is what your computer would receive. This computer got a 2.4, which is not a great rating, but again, this was not really a gaming laptop, so this is more of a multimedia laptop, so it didn't need high-end hardware. As you can see, it displays a lot more system info in a more condensed manner than XP did, where it was kind of in one window and you had separate windows for support. Vista, it's all displayed in one window. Your activation status is displayed down here, which is actually you could change your product key, whereas XP, you had to go to the activation applicate. You actually had to do it through a command prompt using SLMGR, SL Manager. And Vista also had a stricter punishment if you didn't activate. If you had no service packs installed and you did not activate Windows or were not genuine, your computer would go into RFM or reduced functionality mode. All premium games, including Aero, would be disabled. You'd be prohibited from accessing them, and your computer would shut down every single hour without saving and basically hosing all your settings and saving your work. You were not allowed to set backgrounds or screensavers or anything like that, and it was a real pain in the ass. You could not use your computer at all. You could access it with reduced functionality, but it was basically a paperweight at that point. Then with Service Pack 1, it does exactly what Windows 7 does, where your desktop goes to black every hour, and just you get a watermark down there and it says Windows is not genuine. You have to wait a certain amount of time before you can bypass the not genuine message at startup. So yeah, Vista really pushed genuine advantage past its limits, but then people were kind of outraged by the punishment for not activating, so Microsoft made it a little more lenient when Service Pack 1 came out. And other features, obviously you also have your personal folder, which is a new thing in Windows Vista, where you can go basically to any folder you like, and there are also new folders such as saved games and videos were added to Windows Vista. Another feature was called Games Explorer, which was carried over into Windows 7 but removed in Windows 8. Games Explorer basically housed every game you installed on your computer would be here. Now, I have a lot of games because a lot of these games were preloaded on here by Compaq/HP. But this is where all your games would appear. If you click on one, it tells you the rating, and it's just like a video game console trying to combine Xbox functionality in. You could set parental control on Home and the Home Premium and Ultimate, Home Basic, Home Premium, and Ultimate editions of Windows Vista, which would allow you to restrict what kind of games your kids could play. And this is one of the flaws. As you can see, Games Explorer stopped working. So unfortunately, yeah, see, Windows Explorer has stopped working, and if I do that, Camtasia is going to crash if I kill the process. So yeah, that was one problem with Vista. Was one criticism, which I kind of got interrupted there, was it was sluggish because it had a lot of unnecessary crap like the Sidebar and Aero, all slowed Windows Vista down. There were a lot of apps in it that slowed it down, and that was one of the reasons Vista was criticized, was due to it being slow and sluggish and unreliable. With no service packs, it was a lot worse, because if you tried to minimize a window, Aero would glitch out, and you'd just start getting random animations, and it would be really peculiar, and then you'd have to do a hard shutdown because there was no way to close the program even through Task Manager. So that's just one of the... But again, I'm trying to finish the positives of Vista first, and then we'll go into the negatives. Also, Windows Update, that's the last thing I wanted to show, got a new facelift. Instead of having to install updates from a website, Windows Update is now a full-blown program in Vista, where you can select which updates you want to install. Unlike Windows 10, where it forces you, on the Home Edition, it forces you to install all the updates. Pro, you can defer updates, but they'll eventually be installed automatically without your consent. You can't disable them, you can't prevent them from being installed like you could in 7 in Vista, and 8/8.1. But yeah, Vista's automatic updates were a lot more convenient than XP's, although occasionally you would encounter the infamous failure configuring updates reverting changes. The login screen got a facelift. Of course, if I log off, Camtasia will crash, so I can't show that, because I'm recording on actual hardware and not a VM. But the login screen had your profile picture, a shutdown button, and you could type your password. It looked a lot more aesthetically pleasing than it did in XP. With the new Auroras and Aqueduct looks. Vista also had an updated control panel where you had features such as Windows Sideshow, so if you had a little mini display, you could hook it up to that and display gadgets and headlines on via Sideshow. I can't remember where exactly. I think it's under personalization. No, okay. Yeah, I can't remember where Sideshow is in Vista. It's been a while since I've used it. But Sideshow was a feature of Windows Vista that was, again, removed in Windows 8. I had the Windows Mobility Center for laptops, so you could actually go in and adjust power settings, which actually worked quite well. Presentation settings were later added in Windows 7, or it may have been in Vista Service Pack 2 or 1. I don't remember if it was added in Vista. But yeah, this is what, if we go to Mobile PC and click Windows Mobility Center, you can see, yeah, it does have presentation settings and sync settings. Sync Center was new in Vista. You could turn your wireless on, and then of course if your OEM had something, you'd get additional options like from HP here. Tablet PC settings, which I can't show because I don't have a tablet, but if you had a tablet, you'd see a little bar over here that you could tap with your pen and write with handwriting recognition into a Word document or something like that. Vista also featured speech recognition, which was a complete failure. If you when it was first in beta stages, if you watch the Windows Vista speech recognition failure video on YouTube, which is still up, you'll see it, instead of Dear Mom, it got Dear Aunt and Double the Killer, Delete, Select All. I still remember seeing that when I was 9 years old, when Vista was in beta stages in 2006. However, in the final version, speech recognition was a hell of a lot better. It was based off of Dragon, and it worked really well. When I was in school, I used to, or when I was in middle school. I'm finishing my senior year in high school, but when I was in middle school, I used to always write current event reports, which were due at the end of every week on a Friday. I used to always, instead of having to type them out, I just speak into my microphone after training it, and it would work like a charm. And I used Windows Vista back then. So it really, and then it was carried over into Windows 7, and it even still exists in Windows 10 today. So Windows Vista also had the Security Center, which introduced a program called Problem Reports and Solutions, which was renamed Action Center in Windows 7, and was carried over into 10. It basically told you if there were any problems like driver problems or incompatibilities, which we'll get into later. Another common criticism with Vista were driver problems. But yeah, you had the Security Center and Problem Reports and Solutions, so if a program crashed, it could check for a solution online, though it never worked. And I don't think the service still runs today, because every time you try, it just says it can't connect to the servers, so I think Microsoft shut down the servers for Problem Reports and Solutions, so it only works in Windows 7 and up. As I said, parental controls. Windows Defender was bundled in with Windows Vista, however, it is disabled now. I disabled mine because I have MS Security Essentials, because Windows Defender and Windows Vista was just god-awful. If you watch the Windows Vista Sucks video, you'll see they say it uses DCS, or doesn't catch shit technology, and that's pretty much true, because Windows Defender in Vista was the same as it was available in XP as a free update. And it was just absolute crap. It never caught anything, as it said. The only thing I ever got it to catch was Spy Sheriff, but that was about it. I literally purposely infected an XP machine. It didn't catch one damn thing except for Spy Sheriff. So Windows Defender was god-awful. It failed miserably. And no one wanted to pay for Windows Live One Care, which was what Microsoft had before they came out with Security Essentials. I have a funny story to tell, how I almost stole my dad's credit card to fake my age, that I was born in, to fake my date of birth, to say that I was born in 1955. Yes, I'd be 60 years old if that were really my date of birth. But anyways, yeah, I'll tell that story at a later time, maybe during a Luigi's Mansion Let's Play. But anyways, yeah, so you had Windows Defender, which absolutely sucked. You had a new clock calendar where you could quickly view the clock, date and time, and set events. It would tell you events down on this calendar. You could add multiple clocks, unlike XP, where you could not do that before. And Windows Vista also featured Internet Explorer 7. It is upgradable to Internet Explorer 9, which is already being phased out. But Internet Explorer 7 is a complete flop. If you try to use it with any modern websites, you'll get the infamous Internet Explorer cannot open the internet site, operation aborted error message. And it's just a complete fail. It's a complete failure if you try to use it nowadays. Back then it was okay, but it still wasn't a great browser. Even IE8 doesn't run well, so you definitely want to install something more modern like Firefox or Chrome on Vista. Believe it or not, they still support no service packs. You had the Windows Customer Support, Windows Experience Customer Support Improvement Program, which basically allowed you to send feedback about Windows Vista. You can probably guess what kind of feedback Microsoft got when Vista first launched, when that program was introduced. It always pops up in balloon notifications saying, "Help make Windows better." Nowadays, no one really gives a damn about it. But back in the day, people were spamming it with negative feedback. You had a new and improved power setting where you could actually choose a power plan, whereas with XP, it was done through it was a little bit harder. In Vista, they had all sorts of. You had a task view over here, and you could customize all sorts of power plans with ease. You could easily switch between power plans without having to go through the control panel options. You just click the icon on the taskbar and select whichever option you wanted. Networking was easier. It gave you, if you clicked on it, it would tell you the status of your network. Vista also introduced the Network and Sharing Center, which was useful in diagnosing problems. It still exists in Windows 10. It's just not as detailed. Some of the stuff like this here was removed in Windows 7, and you had your tasks here where you could easily manage your wireless networks. Vista introduced a new connection manager, which I'll show here. I'll go to connect to a network. There were more options where you could connect or disconnect with ease. You could easily connect to a network on here. Vista introduced support for WPA2 with Service Pack 1 installed, so you could connect to a WPA2 Enterprise network. Actually, no, WPA2 was included. Support was included in Vista, but not for Enterprise. Service Pack 1 added support for WPA2 Enterprise, where you need both a username and password to be able to connect. So it added support for that. Unfortunately, it doesn't work well because you have to know the domain name to be able to connect to a WPA2 network, and it often doesn't work. So that's a problem. But in Windows 7, that problem was resolved. And Windows Vista was just a completely redesigned Windows XP. It was a whole new deal. So now that we've covered most of the new features in Vista, we'll go ahead and cover some of the negatives, some of the things I didn't like about it. First of all, many people reported BSODs when they first bought it. It was very expensive. I think for Ultimate, back when it was new, it was about $400 or $500 when it first launched on January 30th of 07, with Office 07 as well. And people reported when they were installing it on machines not that old, from 05 or even 06. They reported problems getting it to install because of driver problems. It would often blue screen, or the install would fail for unknown reasons. And people, as I said, there would be driver problems, usually with graphics cards. People wouldn't be able to run Aero because they'd get error messages saying that their graphics card was incompatible. Because Vista was completely rewritten from the ground up off the Windows Server 2K3 code, but it received a completely new kernel. The NT6 kernel, and unfortunately, 90% of the XP drivers failed to run correctly on Vista, and it would often result in blue screens of death or error messages about incompatible drivers. And many manufacturers at the time did not immediately release drivers for Vista, so people had problems getting it to install on fairly new hardware. Was problem number one. Problem number two, there was a lawsuit over the, quote, Windows Vista capable. If you bought a PC during the holiday season of 2006 until May of 2007, you may have gotten a sticker on your computer if you ordered it with XP that would say Windows Vista capable. What that really, many people thought it meant you could run any edition of Windows Vista, and that was true for the most part, but in some cases it meant you could only run the Home Basic edition and not the Premium or Ultimate editions, whereas not the higher editions. And that there was actually a lawsuit that ensued. Microsoft was sued for false advertising for that. So that was another problem with Vista. It was sluggish. As you saw, Games Explorer was not responding for a while because of its, Aero and all the stuff that came bundled with it. There were a lot of unnecessary junkware, which could be disabled. Most of which could be disabled, but most of it was installed by default, and you had no idea it was even there. But there are ways to speed up Windows Vista. Obviously, removing this bloatware would help. I just left it on here just to show what a stock install from an OEM would look like if you bought a Vista machine back in the day. Another problem with Vista was it was heavily marketed. Microsoft had this really crazy launch for it where there were acrobats and a horrific band who could not play for jack crap. It was, they marketed it too much for, it was a very overdone operating system, and they released several editions. I think there were way too many editions. I think with XP you were fine with just Home and Pro. That's all you needed. I'm glad they went back to that starting with Windows 8, because when they had Home Basic, Home Premium, Ultimate, and Business and Ultimate were the retail editions that were available. There were also the Starter Edition and the Enterprise Edition, which were only available to volume licensing customers, and the Starter Edition was only available in emerging markets. So if you were in Chile or Mexico, you could buy a Vista starter machine, which basically had the 3-program limit and was very stripped down and had the watermark and all. You can watch videos of it online. Another problem with Windows Vista was Aero caused a lot of problems, so many people could only run the Vista Basic theme. Many people thought they were getting ripped off when they bought the Ultimate Edition, and many features did not work, again, due to incompatible hardware. Some people had problems getting updates to install, where it would constantly revert changes, which was something a problem you never encountered in XP, where it had to configure the updates when you restarted your computer. Vista would often revert the changes due to a minor failure, and it would take hours, or sometimes it would get stuck in a reboot loop, and it was very difficult to get out of it, to break that reboot loop cycle. Windows Defender was absolute crap, and Vista just had, in general, a lot of bugs when it was first released. Now, in my opinion, Windows Vista is perfectly usable when you install at least Service Pack 1. Service Pack 1, I know everyone says Vista sucks, it was horrible, it was the worst OS ever. I beg to differ. I think once you install Service Pack 1, Vista is a decent OS. In fact, I think it's one of my favorite operating systems once they fixed it with Service Pack 1, and Service Pack 2 makes it even better. With no Service Packs, I will agree, sucked. It sucked. But once Service Pack 1 came out, Microsoft fixed most of the bugs that were in Windows Vista that were causing problems in the original build 6000. And so personally, I do not hate Windows Vista. I think it is and there's more bloatware popping up, even though I told it not to tell me. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's telling me I need an extended warranty. Just say I already purchased one. Watch it say something like, I don't believe you. But anyways, yeah, that's not Vista's fault. That's Compact's fault for loading bloatware on the system. But anyways, as I was saying, Windows Vista was not bad after Service Pack 1 was released, and Service Pack 2 greatly improved the flaws that were not resolved in Service Pack 1. Besides, Service Pack 1 added more support, such as Bluetooth 2.0 support. And there were just a lot of features that were added in the Service Packs, and I think Vista is still a great usable operating system. Unfortunately, many program vendors, due to its low usage rates, now that everyone's moved up to 7 from Vista and XP, Windows Vista support is already ending, but not by Microsoft, but by manufacturers. For instance, you can no longer install Sony Vegas. You can't even install the latest version of iTunes on Windows Vista. Even Apple doesn't support Vista anymore. So a lot of program manufacturers or vendors are dropping support for Vista, and it's a shame. That's why I'm using Camtasia Studio 7, because Camtasia quietly dropped support for Windows Vista with the newest version. They quietly dropped support for it, even though it's not mentioned in the release log. If you try to install it, you'll get an error saying you need Windows 7 or higher. And the other problem was 64-bit support. Windows Vista was one of the first operating systems to feature 64-bit versions with every edition, excluding the Starter Edition, and a lot of computers in 06 could not run 64-bit OSs because you had processors such as especially laptops, because you had processors such as the Intel Core Duo, not the Core 2, but the Core 1 Duo, which was not a 64-bit capable CPU, Pentium Mobile, which ran Vista. It was slow as molasses on that CPU. And the CPUs at the time just weren't geared to run Windows Vista. I believe you need at least an Intel Core Solo or Core Duo to run Windows Vista efficiently. And it also had high system requirements. It had the Home Basic version required 512 megabytes of RAM to run. And while it says on the premium editions, Home Premium and up, that it requires 1 gigabyte of RAM, that's actually the recommended amount. Technically, it only requires 512. It's 512 for every edition, though. Most texts will tell you need at least 1 gigabyte. But even on 1 gigabyte, your computer will be sluggish with Vista. So I recommend, if you're going to run Vista, you really need at least 2 gigabytes to run it efficiently, because 1 gigabyte, you'll be encountering out-of-memory errors and crashes. Even with the service packs installed, you'll encounter problems, and your computer will be very sluggish. So if you're going to run Vista, I recommend at least 2 gigabytes of RAM. And hard drive space, Windows Vista required a hell of a lot more disk space, 15 gigabytes for 32-bit and 20 for 64, whereas XP only required, I think, something like 550 megabytes. Remember, we're talking megabytes here, not gigabytes. for I think for professional and home edition was like something like 500 megabytes of disk space. So XP was very easy to run. Vista had very high system requirements. You needed a graphics card that could support WDDM, Windows Display Driver Module, I think is what that stands for, 1.0, and Pixel Shader 2.0. Most graphics cards at the time, especially laptop GPUs, did not support that, so they were unable to run Aero and were limited to running Vista Basic, since most laptop GPUs are soldered and non-upgradable. But the good news was once manufacturers started adopting Vista around 07, 08, Vista started to become widely adopted, and it was in use for quite some time once the service pack came out, the first service pack came out. And as I said before, Vista is still one of my favorite operating systems. Using it with no service packs, no effing way. But with at least Service Pack 1, I'm cool with it, because I think Vista is a good OS. I think it was a little over marketed, but I still like it as an OS. And I'm kind of upset that program vendors are dropping support for it, even though the extended support doesn't end until April 11th of 2017. So Windows Vista still has a little under a year and a half under its belt of support, and security patches and updates. And program vendors are already saying, screw it, we're just going to move everybody up to 7, which is kind of a shame, because I think Vista was a good OS after Service Pack 1 came out. But enough of hearing me yap about it. I think Windows Vista was a little, it sucked when it first came out, but once the service packs came out, it was a good OS. So, and I still use it on 2 of my machines just for nostalgic purposes, including the one I'm using right now. So, I guess this will be the end of my recording, since I'm getting a little overboard on time here. But if there's one thing I have to say, happy birthday, Windows Vista. And I'll probably make another video for your 10th birthday next year. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys later.